Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things. Today, you will hear the second part of my conversation with Woody Zuill, who's a author, well-known speaker, and a great human being. Shares about how he balances his consulting career as well as being in the speaker network, doing workshops, and making it viable for all. He also talks about how while he didn't get any professional training, but how he learned from the ecosystem and his profound inflection points in between right from being in the band to being a horticulturalist and now a software developer. You will also hear Woody's very deep philosophies on making the whole life better for oneself as well as for people around us. Listen on.
Yeah, Woody, I think that's very, very, very cool thing, right? In fact, I was also going to ask you about why you started speaking in the conferences. And in the end of the day, every time I get on the podium, I have butterflies. How much ever I know the topic, I know everything, but still I have butterflies. So I want to understand from you. I know it may have been to invite others in similar thought process, but how did you know that you like this whole conference speaking and model of teaching people?
So I knew that I needed to speak in front of people back, like I was saying, in the early 90s, but I was not. It wasn't something that came natural to me. You talk about having butterflies. I couldn't even speak in front of 5 people. It was too difficult for me. So I started practicing and learning very little. I had a mentor, a fellow who had been like me. They were very, they had a very difficult time speaking in front of people, but their job required that they did it, and they learned how to do it. And they gave me their advice on how to do it, and I practiced. The one thing they said was, start off by speaking in front of people that you know and that want you to succeed, and don't have very many people. So just get used to collecting your thoughts. And I found 10 or 15 different little techniques. One thing I really liked was coding live in front of people. I would say, we're going to do some graphics things. So the first thing we need to do is just, let's make a blue background. Now, what if we wanted to go from light blue to dark blue? How are we going to do that? And so I knew how to do those things. So it wasn't very hard for me to just code and make me feel comfortable. It's like playing music in front of people. I could play music in front of people after I got used to being in front of people, especially with a band, because it didn't seem as personal that I was exposed, I guess is the word. But anyways, I realized that in about 2005, I started speaking at these little things we called code camps and other small conferences as I gained in my skills in being able to speak. But it was in 2011 that we started working as a team, which we were calling mob programming at the time. And people started hearing about it and asking, can you tell us about it? And I realized we actually need to learn how to talk about this. And we spent a lot of time. What is it we need to talk about? How are we going to say it? How do we make a connection? But you know what was really useful was at the end of each talk. So I gave my first talk in 2012 at a conference about mob programming. And what I noticed that every time I gave the talk, there would be at least 5 or 10 questions people would ask afterwards. I would write those questions down. And then the next time I gave a talk, I would make sure I answered those questions in the talk. So that told me, what do I need to say in my talk to answer the questions people have? Now, they'll still often ask questions, but I was covering more and more of the stuff. And the problem with talking in front of people for me is I'll get lost in what I'm trying to say. So I found using slides that just, had pictures on it, that had a few words, that would help me stay on track. So if I forgot where I was at, I just go to the next slide, and then that reminds me of where I'm going. And that works well for me too.
2-3 things I cull from what you were mentioning. One is this, capitalizing your own band experience, and ensuring that you are doing it, showing it, rather than talking about it. And when you have to talk, you're using the basic slides to actually help you navigate rather than actually showing the presentation itself. I also liked the part where attracting the like-minded people, so that there's no need for you to go and share your resume. People come to you for your work. I think that's a very, very great way to put it. How do you balance the such conferences or conversations that you have, like a coding camp or on all this, with your regular work? Let's say you are having assignments. It could be around change management or around teaching or any of those. How do you balance these two?
Yeah, so I always leave time to go to conferences if I can. If I get invited and I can find a way to go, I will. Now, each conference is different, but many of them will help cover the expenses, such as if I need to fly somewhere or whatever. But can I do that every day, all day? Every day of the year, I wouldn't be able to make a living because I got to also pay the bills. So when I first started speaking at conferences, I would just arrange to do the ones, maybe every 2 or 3 months I could go to one, or if they were really local and they weren't expensive, I could just go to them. But as far as trying to make a living and also doing this, once I got invited to conferences, at that same time, people had started asking me to do workshops on we were calling mob programming. And although I had done some workshop kind of things in helping people learn better coding practices or how to do specific coding things, I'd never done a workshop for mob programming. So I needed to get some experience doing it. And fortunately, there was a really big company, with something like 20,000 software developers who had called me and wanted a workshop. And I thought, okay, I told them I really don't know what I would do, but let's give it a try. So I went to them and I took a lot of notes as we did it, and I learned a lot from doing that. So the combination of going to a conference and then finding a few companies there where I could provide a workshop would pay enough to replace the income I could have made if I had just stayed doing my work. It took about 3 years of doing this that I realized there was so many people wanted me to come do workshops on estimates or coaching, estimates, mob programming, and other things. I am not a proponent of estimates. What I was doing those days, I called no estimates, and I'm calling it beyond estimates now. I think estimates are harmful in software development. I don't think they actually help. I think they misguide us and misdirect us. However, that's unrelated. The point being that people wanted to learn about these things, so I learned how to do the workshops. I actually found a lot of people were very helpful. They said, oh, here's something you can try. Like one of the very first things somebody taught me was that you need to take frequent breaks. So, what do I know? So I went ahead and let's take frequent breaks, like once an hour. Another thing is when the lunch food arrives, you just stop. You don't keep going after the lunch food arrives because everybody's going to think about lunch now and things like that. Just little things I didn't know much about. But the balance here turned out for me that I could continue working in my current job and still go out and do a workshop, a couple times a month. But then it became overwhelming. I had so many people asking for the workshops that I decided just to switch my career and do that. So after 3 years, maybe of doing 2 years, 2 years of doing both my work and some workshops, I just switched to doing the workshops. Now, since the pandemic, everybody in the world knows about the pandemic. You don't need to talk much about that, but almost everybody had to figure out, well, how are we going to work from home? And it actually turns out that the software teaming concept works really well when we're working remotely. It's a little different, but it can work really well. So I've been very busy working remotely, guiding people, even though I started traveling again last year. And I've been pretty much all over the world, not like I was before the pandemic, but I have made it, to Europe and to India and a few other places. I like to get out and travel. I like seeing new things. As a matter of fact, before I ever knew I could make my living doing this, I would still try to get out and travel because you always learn something new when you do that. And I enjoy that. But also it's just fun. Yeah.
Nice.
Did that address what you were asking?
Yeah, you're saying that you try to balance this and try to
Yeah.
combine some kind of workshops or something
Yeah.
which will be useful. And most importantly, I think what you said, the last one is right. In term, whenever I have spoken to people who are very active in software speaking circuit, I used to wonder how they manage. I think your answers hit it right on the head.
Good.
In terms of saying, first you have to be interested in traveling and meeting new people. So moment you have that, I think that the rest of it sort of falls into place, I guess.
Yes. Now that's not for everybody, I'm sure of that. But on the other hand, if somebody thinks they want to become a speaker at conferences, there's lots of opportunities. When I first started speaking at conferences, of the bigger conferences where you have to submit proposals and all that, I really didn't know what I was doing, but I followed the guidelines I'd learned from my mentors. If you're really well prepared, then it's not going to, that at least you don't need to worry about that part of things. So I practiced and practiced and practiced my materials. If I was going to show something in code, I would practice it 50 times before I presented it in front of somebody. And then with these other things like the mob programming, I practiced saying the things I think I needed to say just so I didn't stumble over my words, because it's really easy for me to get jammed up trying to speak in front of people. And then I can't even go on because I get myself so confused. So I practiced a lot. But I have found that almost everybody is rooting for you. They want you to do well. They want you to succeed in what you're doing. So most audiences are very friendly, at least in our field, and makes it relatively easy, even if you're a beginner. People look at me sometimes, one thing that happened in a podcast early on, somebody said, Woody, you're an agile thought leader, and we want to know about blah, blah, blah. And I thought, wait a second, I'm not a thought leader at all. We happened to stumble upon something that other people found interesting. But I don't think of that as being a thought leader. We just happened to be the ones, that others said, hey, what is it you're doing? And we started sharing it. And I think that's critical. I think whatever we know, there's other people that want to learn what we know. And so that's part of this, is we're sharing with each other. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't have learned anything about Agile and better software practices if other people hadn't been sharing those ideas in blog posts or in forums or, podcasts, or in the earlier days, in the 90s, a lot of people were putting stuff into blogs and writing articles. So, and then books. So if other people hadn't shared, I wouldn't have learned anything. It would have been hard. In fact, in 2005, a book came out by Michael Feathers called Working Effectively with Legacy Code. And up to that point, I had been gathering or collecting techniques for working with legacy code, like how can I make my day easier? And then his book came out and it like doubled everything I already knew. It was that much again to help me better understand how to do my work. And if he hadn't have done that, there's a lot I still wouldn't know. So if we know something, somebody else wants to know it, let's share it.
Let's share it. I agree. In terms of collective brain power, you mentioned. So a minute back, you were talking about, initially you started staying within your brain and then making it collective. I think that is the essence of staying, right? We are standing on very giant shoulders.
Yes.
So we have to have our shoulders broad enough so that others can stand on us, right?
Yeah, that's a funny thing. It's like we are part of a chain of this knowledge. We are not the end of it. That when it gets to us, it's not like, okay, it's all been done. We don't need to do anything more. It's our time to take what we've learned, use it, and find ways to share it. And then we can move things forward, not just in our industry, but in the world in general. It's bigger than just software. That's for sure.
Woody, I want to ask a very personal question. I hope you don't mind telling this.
Sure.
So all of us, right, not now, maybe 10 years, 15 years back when I was I was introducing myself every time. I used to talk about my alma mater, where I graduated from, and what kind of engineering I did, or what kind of conversation I had. But in the last 10 years, I think this whole concept of certification, being certified by an agency and all of that seems to be becoming more and more, cliched, if you will.
Yeah.
So I also see in your resume or in your LinkedIn post, I'm sorry, in your LinkedIn post, you said you didn't even mention anything around your education or anything. Is there a reason why you did that?
I never went to school. So I took some classes in programming. Once I was teaching programming at a university, I thought, oh, maybe if I got a degree in this, I would be a professor. So I took some classes and I thought, no, this is a little too boring for me. So but I learned to program simply by programming. I had some software I needed to have. I bought a computer, and then I couldn't find the software I wanted to buy. And I thought maybe I need to learn to program. So I started learning to program, and it took me a couple weeks to get to where I could do something that was useful. In those days, all you need to be able to do is have an idea of what you needed. You're going to have to input some stuff. You're going to have the computer act on it, and you're going to output some stuff. I mean, that's what programming is. It's really a simple idea. And if it's just mathematical calculations, that's easy. A lot of the early stuff I wrote was just to make my business a little bit easier. But what I believe is this: a degree is a good thing to have. A certification is a good thing to have, but it really doesn't define what you're capable of doing. So it goes in both ways. If we think, oh, this person's an engineer, they got an engineering degree, so that we're going to use them as an engineer. What if they're bored with being an engineer and what they'd rather be doing is sales, or they'd rather be doing product, invention or whatever? So we lock people in based on what degree they have, and reverse. There's a lot, I found this anyways, there's a lot of people who don't have a degree in the specific thing they're doing. It's just they're thinking people. And I think, I'm not going to make any judgments of anyone, but I've met very few humans that don't have a lot of value in them, regardless of what their education is, regardless of what their specific education might have been or not have had. So this is like, there's two things that block us with education. And one of us, we think that defines what the person's capable of. And the reverse, we think that if they don't have the education, it defines what they're not capable of. And I don't think either of those are useful. But I would say for myself, if I were to have gotten a degree when I was younger, let's say I wanted to be a horticulturalist. I wanted to work with plants and teach others how to take care of plants and stuff like that when I was a kid. So I signed up, I registered at a California university, and I was going to go to school. On the way to that, I got invited to join a band and play music with this band. And I decided to do that instead. And so, that's what I wanted to do. I would say this: if I had become a horticultural teacher, I have a feeling I would have got bored with that in a couple of years, and I would have gone to something else anyways. So there's no way for me to say, what would have my life been if I had gone down a different path? I did become a Scrum Master in 2007 when Scrum was becoming popular. I worked at a place where they required that I become a Scrum Master. So I went and got my certification from Ken Schwaber. I figured, go to the guy who invented it. And I went and got my certification. And I felt I learned some good things. But if you don't mind, I'm going to share the two things I felt I learned the most there. The first thing was he put us through a long exercise of estimating a complicated project. at the end of which we're supposed to provide, what we think we'll be able to get done and how long it will take. After everybody did their presentations, he said, that's all baloney. You cannot possibly have known how long this is going to take. You don't even know who your developers are. There's no way you could have known this. So that's not what we should be doing. The other thing he said that I thought was really useful, although I had already been thinking in terms of no estimates, but I learned that from Ken. And then another thing he said was, if you're still doing Scrum the way that I'm teaching you 6 months from now, that's not really the spirit of this thing. He said the spirit is to look at what things are going on, how things are going, and continuously improve your processes. Don't just borrow someone else's processes and stick with it. So those were good things to learn. But other than that, I felt getting certified was meaningless. I let that lapse now. I'm not sure. I'm probably going to offend a lot of people by saying that, but those certifications just don't have any real value. They might be a good starting spot, but they're certainly, I don't see much value in that. A lot of jobs require that you have them. So if you got to have one, I guess, like I did, go and get one.
Yeah, it is a very atypical thought, Woody. I belong to the same school of thought, by the way. Whatever certification I've had, I don't normally publish it. It's only for my starting point or learning. Because what happens
That's
is,
right.
moment you do that, you get boxed in. And in Agile, you have so many different certification. So moment you are in this school, you're not in that school. I'm like, no, that's not the spirit. So any case, I think that's a long controversial conversation that we will never get out of. But I thank you that not doing that is very refreshing in terms of saying, are we able to try it and are we learning from it and move on? As you stand today, you have 30 years plus of software development, and you started building software for your own self, and now you are helping. You're doing so many new varied things. So what are some of the inflection points in your career? Have you reflected on that? Can you share them?
Oh yeah. So my overall career, when I was way before software, what I'd found was I didn't like working for other people. It would always felt like we were doing things in the most difficult way, and I would start my own little business instead. So starting way back when, even as young as 16 years old, I had my own little businesses. I would have a business for a while, but I'd get bored with it. And so I would sell it off, piece it off, sell the customer list, whatever I could do, and move on to something else. And I had something like 16 businesses over my life. What I found was that somewhere along the way, what I really enjoyed doing was making things, and I wanted to focus more on making things. So I started a sign shop back in 1978 or 79, learned to paint signs, like letters on buildings and on trucks for businesses. And I really enjoyed that. I did a lot of woodworking, metalworking, plastics, screen printing, hand painting, lettering, on boards and signs. I loved all of that. And I would build a big enough business till I had 10 or 15 employees, and then it would become boring to me. When you get to the size where you're not the main maker anymore, you're now the person running the business, it just would get boring for me. I wasn't there to make a lot of money or to have a big business. I liked the making of things. So when I stumbled onto software development, there were 4 or 5 things I noticed right away. I can do it anywhere, anytime, because I bought my first computer was a portable computer. It's like the size of a sewing machine case you could carry around, And so I could do it anywhere. I could just think up the thing I wanted and make it. And I didn't need to go buy, some wood and get some saws and all the work that it takes to make something. So I liked the making aspect of it. So somewhere in the beginning of that, I really learned that if I could deliver something today, like work for an hour or 2 writing some code, deliver it to myself so it's making my day easier at the end of the day or the beginning of the next day, that would give me a little bit more time to learn to program tomorrow. So each day I would try to do something that would make the next day easier and give me more time. I think I got this from, there was a guy who wrote a book Norton, he started a company later. Peter Norton, I think was his name. He ended up with Norton Utilities and then Symantec and other companies. But anyways,
Virus deduction
the
company.
virus stuff, yeah. So that guy, he wrote a book. I heard him speak somewhere, and this was a long time ago. He said, well, the way I started was there were things on the computer that I would do repeatedly, like I have to drag this to here and then copy that. It wasn't dragging those days. It was all command line. I could copy all these files in this directory into my backup, and I want to automate those things. So I took that to heart. I thought, what can I do that I can automate? So that was a big, if you want to talk about inflection points, is realizing I could write something today that would make tomorrow easier. And I came up with this thought: if I can make tomorrow easier, or something I need to do effortless or unnecessary, then let me do that today to make tomorrow better. Now, I remember somebody saying, you hear this old Chinese proverb where they say, when's the best time to plant a tree? And then the response is 20 years ago. Well, that's only partly true because, for example, when I was a kid, I grew plants and trees and I like doing that. If you plant an apricot tree 20 years ago, then it's already in the second half of its useful life now. Maybe plant it 5 years ago, because it takes about 5 years for it to become productive, and then it will have 20 or 30 years of being productive. So it's not like 20 years ago is the best time to plant a tree. It depends on what you want the tree to do. So the same thing with me is I realized I need to write the software today to make tomorrow easier. And every time I can make tomorrow easier, I get more time to write more code. So I automated everything for myself that I could do, and that gave me more and more time to write code. The next big inflection point for me was when I realized I just want to do this for a living, but I don't want to own a company to do it. And I thought, I got to become attractive to people that hire programmers. But that was in 1998. I don't know if you were writing code in 1998, but
I just started writing C++ code.
Okay. So the easy thing about 1998, 99 was there was such a demand for software developers. You could not help but get a job. So that made it really easy for me to get involved. But my first job was great. They did things in a very much an agile manner. It was a very short contract. They needed a couple extra people to help on something. And when that ended, my second contract was a terrible place to work. And it made me realize, even in software, there's going to be some good places, there's going to be some bad places. And that made a big difference in my life. Right then I realized I want to work in a good place. And I had a lot of trouble finding good places to work. So during that period of my career, I started figuring out, how can we influence things to make every place a good place to work? How do we make it where every place is wonderful? But that was a long period, and I'm still in that period. So from 1999, 2000 until today, I've discovered this: what's an ideal place for me to work might not be an ideal place for you to work. So everybody's different. But if I know what's ideal for me, and I sort of make that public so people know, then I will attract the people that are most likely to help me get that place to work that I would want to work. So that was another big inflection point. The idea of pair programming and teaming, from 2005 till 2010, I really was working on this idea of how many people can we bring together to all work at the same time. And I didn't do a lot of it, but I think starting around 2006, I really started experimenting with 3 people at one computer: a business analyst, a tester, and a programmer, and how effective that could be. Trying to learn to shorten the cycle of time of getting things done. So there's a lot I'm covering right there. Then what really happened was, by the end of that decade, 2009, I realized I no longer want to work at a place where they're not already ready to make things better. So that's what I started looking for at that time. Was up till then, it was hard to find a place that was better, and I still needed to have a job. But now I thought, I can wait to get that job. And so I really thought, I'm just going to wait till somebody agrees we really want to make things better. So that was a big change in my career. But I was already an old guy by then, I guess. I would have been, in my 50s. So I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not worried about raising a family because my daughter was already finishing up with college, and I didn't need to support her anymore. So I had freedom that I didn't have when I was younger. And I decided just find a place that will be uplifting to work. When you come in the morning, you're glad you're there, that you're working with people you want to be with, and you're all trying to make things better. And that's what I focused on for a few years until I realized now I should go out and help other people by doing the workshops and help them learn how to make their life more the way they want it to be. And hopefully I'm able to do a little bit of that. I don't know the results, but I'm hoping it's helpful to people.
Wow, what a beautiful, inflection points you've had in your career, Woody. I'm thrilled to hear this in terms of becoming productive on a day-to-day basis, to building organizations to make themselves better and a better place for people to work. I'm thrilled to hear this.
So I think there's one more thing I want to share. And I don't know how useful this is, but now I'm at this point in my life where if I go back in my life to when I was a teenager and I would look at a person like what I am now, I want to share that. When I was 16 or 17 years old, I was walking across a park and I saw some old gentlemen who are now, they were what my age is now, they were that old. Some of them were even older. And I thought they were playing music. And I went over to hear them playing the music. And there was a very old gentleman there. He was 86 years old. So remember, I'm 16 or 17. He's 86 years old. How much older than me was he? This is a whole lifetime has passed. He was born before there were automobiles. He was born before there were airplanes, before there were radios, before there was television. He was born a long time ago. So I sat and listened to them playing music. And when they were done and starting to put their instruments away, he turned to me and said, "You stayed here and listened to us play for a long time. Do you want to learn to play music?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to learn to play guitar." But he was playing a banjo. And I said, "I just got a banjo. To get your banjo, and I could teach you how to play in 15 minutes. Here's an 86-year-old man telling a 16-year-old boy, I can teach you how to play music in 15 minutes. So I didn't go home. I had it in my truck. I ran over to my truck and got my banjo and brought it over. And he taught me how to play in 15 minutes. And I got to know him. And I'm going to tell you something that he did to me. I think that's a good way to say it. After we were done, he said, "I go to church every Sunday. This Sunday, I don't have anybody to take me. Could you come and take me to church on Sunday?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll be happy to." So he showed me where he lived and I went off, and then on Sunday I came to pick him up at the time he said, and I took him to church. And that didn't seem like anything big deal to me. But years later, I knew him for 10 years. He died. He was 96 years old when he died. Years later, I said, you seem to really trust me. Why is that? He said, "Well, I ask everybody to come and take me to church on Sunday. And everybody says, 'Yes, I'll come and take you to church on Sunday.' You're the only one who ever actually came to take me to church on Sunday." And he said, that way I knew I could believe whatever you said was true. And I thought that's a really interesting thing. He had these little things that he would do to see how another person's character was. So as I reverse my life, I'm now at the end of that. A lot of the times I will look back on how did these older people influence me? I knew my great-grandparents on my mother's side, her grandmother and grandfather. They had come over from Europe at the end of World War II, long time back. And I watched their lives and understood how they lived. And they would share stories with us. My great-grandmother was quite a bit older than me when I was a teenager. So I learned a lot from her. I didn't talk a lot with my great-grandfather. He was already getting pretty old. But these older people were giving me insights that I've used now for my entire life. Things that help me understand because they're looking at life from the other side. I hope that was useful to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was going to ask you, what kind of an advice will you give to other people who are just joining the career, or many people who listen are the mid-career, about 10 years, 15 years into the career. I think I like what you're saying in terms of saying, hey, be, be like what, be trusting as well as be trustworthy, right? Anything
Yes.
else you want to share, any advice you want to share, Woody, with our listeners?
I think getting to know yourself is that's a critical thing. So I think we go through our lives kind of doing what is expected of us, but I think it's really useful to get to know yourself really well. And life isn't, for me, life isn't about getting things. It's about having the life that you are uplifting to others and you're uplifting to yourself. So if we can find a way to have that, I think the value for me is that all the ways throughout my entire career, I found people who are willing to help me get better at what I want to get better at. And if they weren't there, I don't know if I would have ever been able to get the progress that I've made. So in reverse, let's be helpful to others. Let's find those who are willing to help, and let's be helpful to others. But that might not match what you want your life to be. So you got to figure out for yourself, what's meaningful to you, what's good for you. And boy, the world needs help right now. The world needs help right now. Who knows what the future is going to be, but it's not as bright as maybe it looked when I was a kid. So let's make things better.
Thank you so much, Woody. I really, really appreciate your time. And I love the conversation of, starting from a band to be a horticulturist and a very, very well-known speaker and a teacher, to including myself. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.